Today, we're going to dive into a story that feels like it was ripped from today's headlines, but it's also thousands of years old. It's all about a choice, a really tough choice, between the truth and what everyone else is shouting for.
So let's kind of set the stage with a word you've probably heard a lot, post-truth. Believe it or not, all the way back in 2016, Oxford Dictionary called this their word of the year. It's this idea that feelings and what we believe to be true can just completely drown out the actual facts. I mean, you see it everywhere, right? Social media mobs, AI fakes, these modern-day witch hunts where emotion, not actual evidence, ends up being the judge.
But this dilemma, it is not new, not even close. Almost 2,000 years ago, a Roman governor, a guy named Pontius Pilate, stood looking at a prisoner and just kind of cynically tossed out this exact same question: what is truth? And you know, he wasn't really looking for an answer. He was basically saying the whole idea didn't matter. He'd already decided that public opinion was way more important.
And that question from Pilate, well, it drops us right into the heart of our story, the trial of Jesus. And this was so much more than just a legal case. It was a battleground. You had political ambition, religious power, and raw mob psychology all colliding to put truth itself on trial.
You know, what's really striking is just how fast and honestly how illegal this whole process was. Jesus went through 6 separate trials in less than 24 hours. 3 of them were religious, 3 were political. The religious ones, they happened in the middle of the night, which was a huge violation of Jewish law, and they were built on totally false testimony. But here's the thing, the Jewish council couldn't actually order an execution. To do that, they needed Rome.
And this is absolutely the key. They made a strategic pivot. They knew a charge like blasphemy would mean absolutely nothing in a Roman court, so they changed the story. They accused Jesus of trying to overthrow the nation, of telling people not to pay taxes to Caesar, and claiming to be a king. In other words, they accused him of treason. They turned a religious fight into a political threat that Rome simply could not ignore.
Okay, so this all leads to the big moment of decision, out in Pilate's courtyard. He gave the crowd a choice. It was a tradition, a pardon for the Passover festival. They could release one prisoner. And the choice they had was just so stark. It was basically a vote between 2 totally different ideas of what a savior should even be. So on one hand, you've got Jesus, who talked about a kingdom built on love and sacrifice. And on the other hand, Barabbas. I mean, his name literally means son of the Father, and he was a revolutionary, a murderer who led violent riots against Rome. The crowd, you have to understand, they were desperate for a military hero to kick out their oppressors. To them, Barabbas looked like strength. Jesus, who taught people to love their enemies, he just looked like weakness. So they chose the kind of power they could understand.
But the crowd didn't just come up with this on their own. The Gospels use this one specific Greek word, anaseo, to describe what the chief priests were doing. It means to shake up or to stir up. They were deliberately whipping up the crowd's emotions, just pouring gasoline on the fire of their political anger until any kind of reasonable choice was just impossible.
And that really gets to the heart of the danger of mob psychology, doesn't it? One angry person, they might just feel an emotion. But 1,000 angry people, they can lose their minds. In a crowd, your own individual conscience just kind of melts away, and it's replaced by this collective rage. The group feels incredibly powerful, but it never, ever takes responsibility for what it does.
And who was caught right in the middle of all this? Governor Pontius Pilate. He was the one with all the power, the final say. But he was facing his own crisis, a huge choice between his own career and his own conscience.
Look, Pilate wasn't clueless here. Not at all. He knew Jesus was innocent. He could see that the chief priests were just motivated by pure professional envy. His own wife even sent him a message begging him to have nothing to do with that righteous man. But Pilate was also politically weak. He had a pretty bad track record, and he was absolutely terrified that another riot would get him fired or worse by the emperor, Tiberius, who was known to be ruthless. And in the middle of all this chaos, the lies, the political games, the shouting, what did Jesus do? He said almost nothing. He was almost completely silent. But this wasn't a silence of weakness or giving up. No, it was this dignified, active obedience to a bigger plan, fulfilling this ancient prophecy that said he would be like a sheep silent before her shearers.
Pilate, he kept trying to find a way out of this mess, but the leaders of the crowd, they backed him into a corner. And that's when they played their trump card. It was a direct threat, not just to his career, but to his life. If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. See, reporting him for releasing a supposed traitor, that would have been the end for Pilate.
And just like that, the decision was made. He called for a bowl of water, washed his hands in front of everybody, and basically said, "I'm innocent of this man's blood." But that little bit of theater, it couldn't wash away the reality. He chose his career over the truth.
So the final score? Just one. One innocent man was condemned, and one guilty man walked free, all to quiet down the shouts of the crowd.
Now this looks like a complete and total defeat for truth, right? But the story flips this whole moment of injustice on its head. The cross wasn't really an end. It was a statement, a stand taken against the overwhelming tide of what everyone else wanted.
And this is where you find the real paradox of the story. From a theological point of view, this completely unjust swap is the entire point. Barabbas, the guilty one, he's basically a stand-in for all of us. He gets to go free because the innocent one takes his place. It's this moment where a really deep truth is revealed, not through a big victory, but through a total sacrifice.
And what about the man who made the safe choice? What was the long-term consequence for him? Well, Pilate might have saved his job that day, but his name is now forever stuck in history as the ultimate symbol of a cowardly compromise. Think about it. Suffered under Pontius Pilate. His choice for a little temporary security got him an eternal legacy of failure.
And this right here brings it all back home to us. The truth in that courtroom didn't disappear because it couldn't be proven. Pilate knew what the truth was. No, it collapsed because the people in power, and then the crowd, decided they wanted something else more. So what's the takeaway for us, you and me, living in our own post-truth world, is that we all face our own Pilate moments every single day.
We are all confronted with this exact same conflict. The shouts of the crowd, the trends, the outrage, the popular opinions, they are so incredibly loud. And the voice of truth, of our own conscience, is often just a whisper. The real question is, which one do we listen to? Which one do we end up obeying?
I mean, whether it's at your job or in your family or just scrolling online, the pressure to just go with the flow is enormous. In a world where likes feel like love and online mobs can absolutely destroy a person's life, that temptation to just wash our hands of it all and go along with the crowd, it is just as powerful today as it was in Pilate's courtyard.
And that leaves us with one last, really challenging thought. This story is telling us that truth isn't decided by a vote. It doesn't need a majority to approve it to be true. In this story, the truth was with the one person that absolutely everybody rejected. It's always been on the cross, standing against the tide. So the only question left is, where will you stand?